Greetings, mathematicians. Here we have example 7. Let's go ahead and read it. So the girls' swim team is hosting a fundraiser. They would like to raise at least $500. They are selling candles for $5 and flower arrangements for $6. The girls estimate that at most they will have sold 200 items. Part 1, write a system of inequalities to represent the situation. Part 2, graph the system of inequalities. And then part 3, 120 candles have been sold. Use your graph to determine a reasonable number of flower arrangements that must be sold in order for the girls to reach their goal of at least $500 and justify your answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight the information that we know and see if we can use that to set up that system of inequalities. So we know we need to raise at least $500, okay? They're selling candles. Those are $5 each. And then we're also selling flower arrangements, and those are $6 each. Okay? They estimate that they are going to sell at most 200 items. So at most 200 items. Okay, so this is all the information that we need to set up that system. Okay, so let's go ahead and define those variables. We're selling candles and we're selling flower arrangements. So I'm going to say let's use a different color. So we know we're selling candles and we know we're selling flower arrangements. Let's go ahead and define our variables. So let X equal the number of candles sold. So number of candles. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and define Y, and that is going to be the number of flower arrangements. Okay, so we need two inequalities here. Let's go ahead and focus on the number of items. So we know at most they're going to sell 200 items. Okay, so all we do for that one is we take X, right, the number of candles sold. We add that to Y, the number of flower arrangements sold, and we know that they're selling at most 200 items. So this has to be less than or equal to 200. Okay. That's the number of items sold inequality. The next inequality, we're going to focus on the money, right? So candles sell for $5, so we have 5 times X, so 5X, plus the profit from the amount of the flower arrangements, which is 6Y. And we know that they want to sell at least $500. So this has to be greater than or equal to $500. Okay. So we can go ahead and use our X and Y intercepts to graph. Let's do it. So this first inequality right here, we can see, right, if I solve for the X and the Y intercepts, the X intercept is going to be 200, and the Y intercept is also going to be 200. So let me go ahead and put that down. So we have the X intercept is 200, 0. And then the Y intercept is going to be very similar, 0, 200. Okay, so we know there's X and Y intercepts. We're going to do the same thing with that second inequality. Okay, so basically we set 5X is equal to 500, which means that the X intercept, well, what's 500 divided by 5? That is 100. So here we have 100, 0. And then that Y intercepts. Okay. Well, I just set 6Y is equal to 500, right? And then we do 500 divided by 6, which is approximately 83. So you have 0, 83. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph those points. I'm going to go ahead and use red for this one, okay? So if I'm looking at my graph, 200, we need to think about what scale should I use to count along those axes, okay? I see that if I go all the way up to 200, that should work out perfectly, right? Because if I count by 20s, we'll go all the way up to 200. So we're going to count by 20s. So we have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180, 200. Okay? Same thing along the y-axis. Count by 20s. And this is just a guess and check, right? So I'm looking at what are my X and Y intercepts. I see that we need to get to 200, and it works out really nicely that we just count by 20s. Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and use that red for that first one. We have an x-intercept of 200, 0. So over here, we have a y-intercept of 0, 200. So up there, it is less than or equal to, so it's going to be that solid line. So we have this line right here. Okay, let's go ahead and use orange for this inequality. Okay, and again, we know our x and y intercept. So the x-intercept is at 100, 0. The y-intercept is at 0, 83. Okay, and then connect it with that line. Now we have to go ahead and determine the shading, right? So for this red line, we have less than or equal to. Okay, less than or equal to means that we're going to be shading below this red line. Okay, and then if I'm looking at that orange line, well, we have greater than or equal to, which means that we're going to be shading above the orange line. So putting those two pieces together, that means that we are shading this middle region right here. So we're interested in this region right here. Okay, so all our possible solutions can be in there. So we did part 1, we wrote that system of inequalities. We did part 2, we graphed the system. Now we have to look at part 3. So let's see what we can think about that. 120 candles have been sold. Use your graph to determine the reasonable number of flower arrangements sold in order to reach that goal of at least $500. Okay, so we know we sold 120 candles, right? That is going to be along the x-axis, which means that we are interested in this, on these points above this line right here. Right, here's 120. We're interested in what is the number of possible flower arrangements that could be sold to generate that profit of at least $500, right? So I can pick any region that's in here, right? Because it's greater than 120, but it's also still maintaining that less than 200 items, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select a random point. Let's go ahead and pick the point. We can pick a point. It has to be along the 120. I'm going to pick a point right here. How many flower arrangements is that? That's 40, right? So the number of flower arrangements is 40. Let me go ahead and write that down. So 40 flower arrangements were sold. And again, we could have picked multiple answers here. It just depends on what point you're selecting on this line.